There's a spiritual practice so profound, so transformative, that most people unconsciously avoid it their entire lives. Not because it's complicated. In fact, it's devastatingly simple. Not because it requires special training or years of preparation. It can be started this very moment. People avoid it because it demands something most of us aren't willing to give: the complete death of who we think we are. This isn't about meditation retreats or ancient rituals, though it encompasses both. This isn't about following a guru or joining a spiritual community, though it can enhance both. This is about a discipline so sacred, so fundamentally transformative, that it literally rewrites the operating system of your soul. I'm talking about the discipline of radical self-honesty. Not the surface-level honesty we practice in therapy or self-help work. I'm talking about the kind of honesty that strips away every comfortable lie, every spiritual bypass, every carefully constructed identity you've built to avoid facing the truth of what you really are. Most people spend their entire spiritual journey trying to become something better, something more evolved, something closer to their idea of enlightenment. But this sacred discipline asks something far more terrifying. What if you stopped trying to become anything and instead had the courage to see what you actually are right now, without any filters, without any spiritual makeup, without any comforting stories about your progress or potential? This discipline doesn't make you more spiritual. It reveals that the very concept of becoming more spiritual is the primary obstacle to recognizing what you've always been. Are you ready to handle this level of truth? When I speak of radical self-honesty as a sacred discipline, I'm not referring to the psychological honesty we're familiar with, acknowledging our flaws, admitting our mistakes, or being truthful about our emotions. I'm pointing to something far more fundamental: the willingness to see through every story, every identity, every belief about yourself that keeps you feeling separate from the truth of your being. This discipline is sacred because it's the direct path to what every spiritual tradition ultimately points toward: the dissolution of the false self and the recognition of what you truly are. It's radical because it doesn't gradually chip away at illusion, it obliterates it completely in moments of absolute clarity. Most spiritual practices are designed to make you feel better about yourself, to improve your life, to give you experiences of peace or bliss or connection. Radical self-honesty doesn't care about making you feel better. It cares about making you free. And freedom, real spiritual freedom, often begins with the complete dismantling of everything you thought you knew about yourself. This isn't self-criticism or spiritual self-flagellation. This is the precise, surgical removal of every false layer that obscures your true nature. It's like cleaning a window. You don't improve the window by adding more layers. You remove everything that prevents the light from shining through clearly. In 2026, as we navigate this unprecedented time of collective awakening, this discipline becomes even more crucial. We're living in an era of spiritual materialism, where enlightenment has become another commodity to acquire, another identity to cultivate. Social media is filled with spiritual personas, carefully curated awakening experiences, and performance spirituality that keeps us trapped in the very seeking that prevents genuine realization. The discipline of radical self-honesty cuts through all of this. It asks, who are you when you're not performing spirituality? What remains when you strip away your spiritual achievements, your meditation experiences, your insights and realizations? What's here when you stop trying to be awakened and simply see what's already awake? This discipline is terrifying because it reveals that most of what we call spiritual progress is actually spiritual procrastination, elaborate ways of avoiding the simple recognition of what we already are. It's transformative because once you see through the seeker, once you recognize the one who's always been awake, the entire spiritual search reveals itself as a beautiful but unnecessary detour.
The question isn't whether you're ready for this discipline. The question is whether you're tired enough of seeking to finally stop and see. The first aspect of this sacred discipline that makes it so challenging is that it requires the complete death of your spiritual identity. Not the death of your spirituality, but the death of the one who thinks they're on a spiritual path, making spiritual progress, becoming more spiritually evolved. This is perhaps the most difficult thing for sincere spiritual seekers to face. The recognition that the very one who's been seeking, the one who's been accumulating spiritual experiences and insights, the one who's been trying to awaken, that seeker is itself the primary obstacle to what it's seeking. It's like a wave trying to find the ocean. The wave can study the ocean, meditate on the ocean, have profound experiences of oceanic consciousness, but as long as it maintains its identity as a wave seeking the ocean, it will never recognize that it is the ocean, temporarily appearing as a wave. Let me tell you about Marcus, a meditation teacher who had been practicing for over 15 years. He had profound experiences in meditation, could guide others into deep states of consciousness, and was respected in his spiritual community as someone who had made real progress. Yet he came to me with a confession that he'd never shared with anyone. "I feel like a fraud," he said. "I can access these beautiful states. I can speak eloquently about consciousness and awakening, but there's this persistent sense that I'm still on the outside looking in, like I'm performing enlightenment rather than living it." As we talked, it became clear that Marcus had built an entire identity around being a spiritual person. His self-worth was tied to his meditation experiences, his insights, his role as a teacher. He had unconsciously created a spiritual ego that was just as invested in maintaining itself as any worldly ego. The breakthrough came when I asked him a simple question: who are you when you're not being spiritual? The question stopped him cold. For several minutes he sat in silence, and I could see something shifting in his awareness. Finally, he looked up with tears in his eyes. "I don't know," he whispered. "I've been being spiritual for so long, I don't remember who I am underneath all of that." In that moment of not knowing, Marcus touched something he'd been seeking for 15 years. Not a spiritual experience, not an altered state, but the simple recognition of the awareness that had been present before he became a seeker, during all his seeking, and would remain after all seeking ended. "It's like I've been wearing spiritual clothes for so long, I forgot I was naked underneath," he said later. "And the nakedness, the pure awareness without any spiritual identity, that's what I was looking for all along." This is what the discipline of radical self-honesty reveals. The seeker and the sought are not two. The one who's been looking for awakening is the very awakenness it's been seeking. But this recognition can only occur when we're willing to let the seeker die, not through effort or practice, but through the simple honesty of seeing what's already here. "It's like I've been wearing spiritual clothes for so long, I forgot I was naked underneath," he said later. "And the nakedness, the pure awareness without any spiritual identity, that's what I was looking for all along." This is what the discipline of radical self-honesty reveals. The seeker and the sought are not two. The one who's been looking for awakening is the very awakenness it's been seeking. But this recognition can only occur when we're willing to let the seeker die, not through effort or practice, but through the simple honesty of seeing what's already here. "It's like I've been wearing spiritual clothes for so long, I forgot I was naked underneath," he said later. "And the nakedness, the pure awareness without any spiritual identity, that's what I was looking for all along." This is what the discipline of radical self-honesty reveals. The seeker and the sought are not two. The one who's been looking for awakening is the very awakenness it's been seeking. But this recognition can only occur when we're willing to let the seeker die, not through effort or practice, but through the simple honesty of seeing what's already here. "It's like I've been wearing spiritual clothes for so long, I forgot I was naked underneath," he said later. "And the nakedness, the pure awareness without any spiritual identity, that's what I was looking for all along." This is what the discipline of radical self-honesty reveals. The seeker and the sought are not two. The one who's been looking for awakening is the very awakenness it's been seeking. But this recognition can only occur when we're willing to let the seeker die, not through effort or practice, but through the simple honesty of seeing what's already here.
I witnessed this confrontation in Sarah, a woman who had spent 20 years in various spiritual traditions. She'd done ayahuasca ceremonies, studied with Tibetan masters, practiced Kundalini yoga, explored every form of consciousness expansion you could imagine. She had a library of spiritual books, a daily practice routine, and could speak fluently about chakras, energy bodies, and multidimensional consciousness. But when she sat with me and I asked her to simply be aware of being aware, not to do anything spiritual, not to access any special state, just to notice the awareness that was noticing, something unexpected happened. "This is it?" she asked, almost incredulous. "This simple awareness that's always been here? This is what I've been seeking for 20 years?" I could see the shock in her eyes as she realized that the consciousness she'd been trying to expand, develop, and purify was already perfect, already complete, already everything she'd been seeking through all her practices and experiences. "But what about all my spiritual experiences?" she continued. "What about my visions, my energy openings, my connections with spirit guides? Were those all meaningless?" "Not meaningless," I replied, "but perhaps unnecessary. Like decorating a diamond to make it more beautiful. The decorations might be lovely, but they don't improve the diamond." This confrontation with the 0 point, the recognition that you're already what you're seeking, can be devastating to the spiritual ego. It means that all your spiritual achievements, all your years of practice, all your profound experiences were like someone spending years learning to walk when they were already walking. Sarah went through what she later described as spiritual grief, mourning the loss of her identity as someone on a spiritual journey, someone making progress, someone with special experiences and insights. But underneath that grief was an incredible relief. "I don't have to become anything," she said. "I don't have to achieve anything. I don't have to be special or enlightened or evolved. I can just be what I already am, and that's enough. That's everything." This is the terror and the liberation of radical self-honesty. It reveals that you're already home, you were never lost, and the entire journey was a beautiful but unnecessary detour from what was always already here. The third aspect that makes this discipline so difficult is the complete dissolution of the concept of spiritual progress. Not just your personal progress, but the entire framework that suggests consciousness can be developed, expanded, or improved in any way. This is perhaps the most challenging realization for sincere spiritual practitioners. The recognition that consciousness, what you truly are, is not something that can be cultivated, achieved, or attained. It simply is, and it's always been exactly what it is, regardless of your spiritual practices or experiences. Most spiritual traditions, despite their ultimate pointing toward non-dual awareness, still operate within a framework of development. There are stages to pass through, levels to achieve, states to stabilize. Even non-dual teachings often speak of embodying or integrating realization, as if awareness itself could be more or less present. The discipline of radical self-honesty reveals this entire framework as a beautiful but ultimately unnecessary elaboration on something that's already complete. It's like trying to improve space by filling it with beautiful objects. The objects might be lovely, but space itself is already perfect and doesn't need improvement. Let me share the story of David, a Zen practitioner who had been sitting meditation for 12 years. He'd attended countless retreats, had profound experiences of emptiness, and was considered by his teacher to be making excellent progress toward awakening. He came to me because despite all his practice and experiences, he felt like something essential was still missing. "I've had glimpses," he said, "moments where the self disappears completely, where there's just pure awareness without any center. But then I come back to ordinary consciousness, and I feel like I'm starting over again. How do I make these states permanent?" As we explored his experience, it became clear that David was treating awareness like a state to be achieved, rather than recognizing it as what he already was. He was trying to get into awareness, rather than recognizing that awareness was what was trying to get somewhere. The shift happened when I asked him, who is it that comes back from these experiences of pure awareness? He sat with the question for a long time, and I could see him investigating his experience with genuine curiosity rather than trying to achieve anything. "Wait," he said slowly. "If there's pure awareness in those moments, and then I come back, who's aware of both the pure awareness and the I that returns? What's aware of the coming and going of different states?" In that moment, David recognized the awareness that had been present before his meditation practice, during all his experiences of emptiness, and in his ordinary everyday consciousness. The awareness that was never absent, never needed to be cultivated, and was already what he was seeking through all his practice. "It's like I've been trying to find water while swimming in the ocean," he said. "The very effort to find it was what made it seem absent." This is what the dissolution of spiritual progress reveals. You are already what every practice is designed to help you realize. The practices might be beautiful, they might be helpful in removing obstacles to this recognition, but they cannot create or improve what you already are. I want to tell you about the most profound example of this sacred discipline I've ever witnessed, because it illustrates perfectly why most people can't handle this level of truth, and what becomes possible when someone can. Her name was Elena, and she was what you might call a spiritual overachiever. She'd been on a conscious spiritual path for over 25 years. She'd studied with masters in India, completed multiple teacher training programs, had profound psychedelic experiences, practiced every form of meditation you could imagine, and had built a successful career as a spiritual coach and healer. Elena came to me not because she was struggling, but because she was succeeding too well. Her spiritual life was beautiful, her practice was consistent, her clients were transforming, and she was respected in her community as someone who had done the work. Yet she felt increasingly hollow inside. "I feel like I'm living in a spiritual performance," she confessed during our first session. "Everything I do, everything I say, even my private thoughts, it all feels like I'm playing the role of an awakened person rather than actually being one. But I don't know how to stop without losing everything I've built." As we talked, it became clear that Elena had created an elaborate spiritual identity that was just as imprisoning as any worldly identity. She had spiritual opinions about everything, spiritual explanations for every experience, and spiritual goals for every interaction. Her entire life had become a spiritual project. The breakthrough came when I asked her to do something that terrified her. Spend one full day without doing anything spiritual. No meditation, no spiritual reading, no conscious breathing, no mindfulness practices, no spiritual language or concepts. Just live as an ordinary human being without any spiritual agenda whatsoever. "But that's not who I am," she protested. "I've been spiritual for so long, I don't know how to be anything else." "Exactly," I replied. "That's what we're investigating." Elena agreed to the experiment, but she called me that evening in a panic. "I feel like I'm disappearing," she said. "Without my spiritual practices and identity, I don't know who I am. It's terrifying." I encouraged her to stay with the not knowing, to let herself disappear completely if that's what was happening. Over the next few days, Elena went through what she later described as the dark night of the spiritual soul, a complete dismantling of her spiritual identity. "I woke up this morning and realized I was still here," she said, laughing. "All my spiritual identity dissolved, but I'm still here. And what's here is so much simpler, so much more ordinary than anything I was trying to achieve through all my spiritual practices." Elena had discovered what lies beneath all spiritual seeking: pure, simple awareness that doesn't need to be spiritual, doesn't need to be special, doesn't need to be anything other than what it already is. "It's like I've been trying to make water wetter for 25 years, she said. "All my practices, all my experiences, all my spiritual growth, they were like adding perfume to the ocean. Beautiful, perhaps, but completely unnecessary." What's remarkable about Elena's story is what happened next. She didn't abandon her spiritual practices or her work as a teacher, but everything changed because it was no longer coming from someone trying to be spiritual. It was simply the natural expression of what she already was. "I still meditate," she told me months later, "but not to achieve anything or become anyone. I meditate the way flowers bloom, because it's natural, not because it improves the flower. I still teach, but I'm not teaching people to become awakened. I'm helping them recognize what they already are. Elena's clients noticed the difference immediately. Her teaching became more powerful, more authentic, more transformative, not because she had gained something new, but because she had stopped pretending to be something she wasn't. This is the ultimate fruit of radical self-honesty, not the achievement of some spiritual state, but the recognition of what you are when you stop trying to be anything at all. So how do you actually practice this sacred discipline of radical self-honesty? How do you begin to dismantle the spiritual seeker without losing your way entirely? The answer is both simpler and more challenging than you might expect. The first step is what I call spiritual fasting, temporarily abstaining from all the spiritual activities, concepts, and identities that you've been using to define yourself. This doesn't mean abandoning spirituality forever, but rather creating space to see what remains when you're not actively being spiritual. Choose one day, just one day, where you don't engage in any spiritual practices. No meditation, no spiritual reading, no conscious breathing, no mindfulness, no spiritual language or concepts. Don't try to be present, don't try to be aware, don't try to be anything. Just be an ordinary human being without any spiritual agenda. This might sound easy, but for most people who've been on a spiritual path, it's terrifying. You'll likely discover how much of your identity is wrapped up in being someone who meditates, someone who's conscious, someone who's on a spiritual path. You might feel like you're losing yourself. Good, that's exactly what needs to happen. The second step is what I call identity archaeology, honestly examining every spiritual belief, experience, and achievement to see what's actually true versus what you've been telling yourself. Ask yourself, what do I actually know for certain about consciousness, awakening, or my own spiritual progress? What am I assuming based on what I've read or been taught? This requires brutal honesty. Most of what we think we know about spirituality is actually borrowed knowledge, concepts we've adopted from teachers, books, or traditions without directly verifying them in our own experience. The discipline asks you to temporarily set aside all borrowed knowledge and see what you actually know directly. The third step is the most challenging, learning to rest in not knowing. Instead of trying to figure out who you are spiritually, or what level of consciousness you've achieved, or how awakened you are, simply rest in the honest acknowledgement that you don't know. This not knowing isn't ignorance, it's the space where genuine discovery becomes possible. Most people can't handle this level of honesty because it requires giving up the comfortable story of being someone who's making spirit.
But here's the paradox. This 0 point, this complete not knowing, this dissolution of the spiritual seeker, this is exactly what every spiritual tradition ultimately points toward. It's not the absence of awakening, it's awakening itself, stripped of all the spiritual decoration we've added to it. The invitation is simple. Stop trying to be awakened and see what's already awake. Stop trying to become conscious and notice what's already aware. Stop trying to find yourself and see what was never lost. And that, my friends, brings us to the heart of why this sacred discipline is so transformative and why most people unconsciously avoid it their entire lives. It's not because it's difficult, it's because it's too simple. It's not because it requires years of practice, it's because it can happen in an instant. It's not because you need to become someone special, it's because it reveals that what you already are is more extraordinary than anything you could ever become. The discipline of radical self